And this last study is about radicalization and violent extremism, what we know and what we should research further. And the questions here are, what does research show us about radicalization and violent extremism and its relationship to intergroup relations? And then what are the roles of social psychology and political science in better understanding this? The methods here were that the authors provided this overview of what we know about radicalization and violent extremism, and provided some examples that many of us are more recently familiar with. They explained how these violent actions or ideologies might occur and what we currently know about how we might help prevent them. Then additionally, the authors discussed just how and why social psychology and political science experts may be key in helping us do this. And so they presented all these different recent research findings and reviewed how individuals and groups may end up leaning towards these radical and violent ideologies. And what they found here is that a lot of research has arisen in the past couple decades post 9/11 due to these kind of major landmark events of violence and extremism. And the authors discuss current research that shows how people might fall into extremism, how much of this is influenced by intergroup relations, as well as the various reasons this might happen. For example, this might be threats to an in-group or feeling ostracized by an out-group that might lead someone to be more extreme in their behavior. And one key finding that was mentioned here is just how important it is to understand how to prevent extremism, as it isn't something people are born with necessarily, but it can easily over time develop. And so due to the research, additionally, due to the research and focus areas of political science, I keep saying political silence, I don't know why, political science and social psychology, these fields specifically are very well suited to help us better understand these critical issues. And the kind of key takeaways from this that Natalie pulled was there are many reasons for how one might become involved in radical ideologies or violent extremism. Some can be individual based, but many reasons can be rooted in intergroup relations, which is, I think, what a lot of the findings of this report came out with. And so in the larger scope of conflict resolution, understanding the unique situations that might cause or have caused conflict in general are critical to helping resolve conflict and prevent it in the future. And yeah, so that's what we have for this one.
Yeah, very, very interesting, like using violent extremism to highlight the need to speak more about, in group, out group, and those larger kind of subdivisions of society that have more detrimental or have the potential to have more detrimental kind of consequences. Very interesting. And I think for the workplace, applying this to the workplace, similarly, like right where there's a potential for more destruction when it comes to maybe like departmental, like larger group rather than just individual interpersonal conflict, but between departments or between different like subdivisions of a larger organization, there's just going to be there's bound to be a larger destruction than that. So a key takeaway, focus on making sure that your organization, your company acknowledges that everyone is part of the same whole, right, Tony? Like, as we say in our training, what's in the one is in the whole. And I think this kind of highlights that need to make sure that departments and there's not necessarily like division and conflict amongst different groups within the larger structure.
That's why I think it's so important to have those opportunities where people are able to work together across teams, even if it's just, meetings or talking about things that aren't even necessarily work related, but that they get to have positive experiences across teams, across disciplines, ethnicities, all of that. I think the more positive experiences that you have communicating and listening and learning, then that's the kind of thing that will help to counter the tendencies toward, extremism and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, positive intergroup contact. Mm-hmm. Super important. Just also, I wonder, it makes me think of like how, this is maybe kind of a tangent, but it makes me think of how maybe some of our trainings that we do at times, does kind of mesh, I think, people from different areas, depending on obviously who's being involved. But I feel like in some ways, like trainings, like on conflict resolution doesn't only help you, it doesn't only help you, become better in these skills, but it's also, you're meshing with people maybe you wouldn't normally mesh with, and maybe, role playing with them on certain conflict resolution skills, maybe that'll, help you be even better, suited to handle conflict with them as a department, like seeing them in that group in the future. I think that's interesting to think of it that way.
Yeah, and Noah, that just triggered a memory of a recent, organization that we did training with, and there were mixed kind of roles and personnel involved, and there was a mix also of feedback as far as enjoying that opportunity to engage with another from a different department or whatnot, or different role, and then also sort of that uncomfortable, a little bit more of a negative feedback as well. But I hear what you're saying, and I agree, and I think maybe it's just hard to, there's going to be some uncomfortable feelings initially, but in the long run, I think it does create like that space for positive intergroup contact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting that they that they put down, kind of more negative feedback, like, oh, this is an uncomfortable, which, I mean, it is I see why it is an uncomfortable thing. But then again, uncomfortable is not always bad. So I feel like,
yeah, absolutely. Push your comfort zone into your learning edges, right?
Right.
And well, and I think power dynamics are a lot of times at play too. And so that brings a whole nother sort of context, right? Like factor to the context, I should say.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.